First of all, on the sheet that you should all have, it's just one page. Apologies for a typo. One typo slipped through because I did it with insufficient diligence. You'll see diligence down at the bottom, almost second last line has got a superfluous I. And some of you have had it corrected by hand, others on a second printing because there weren't enough, the correction won't be there.
That was the French spelling.
Sorry?
I thought it was the French spelling.
Diligence. I'm not sure they do. Anyway, I'll try and avoid going into... No, I can't really avoid going into French. I've got some Italian and Spanish and things to go into. Maybe we'll do a bit of French, but not with I'm fairly sure there's no I. There's diligent. Okay. Stop trying to mislead me at this early stage, or sabotaging it. This is good. I'm conscious that there are people here who may know nothing or virtually nothing about Sanskrit and Pali. Others, particularly those few who have diligently followed the Sanskrit and Pali course that I do with the Buddhist Society, will hopefully be very well versed after all this time. So I'll try and pitch this so there's something for everyone, including those who know quite a bit and those who know nothing. One thing, can you hear me at the back all right? Am I audible to you? Okay, jolly good, thanks. This isn't, what I'll be talking about is not about learning Pali in the sense you can just open a book in it and read it. That's, that is, don't want to put you off, but it's a major undertaking. And if you did a degree in it, you might be doing 1,200 hours. I'm not asking you to do that. It's a huge undertaking to reach a point from zero where you can just open the suttas and start reading. The good news is, that's the bad news, the good news is that even from virtually zero knowledge, you can gain a huge amount by looking at the individual key words. Now, we have translations that are subject to the limitations of any translation that are excellent, but are subject to the inherent limitations of all translations. Namely, there are certain key words for which there is no direct word-for-word equivalent from Sanskrit and Pali to English. And that's the same between virtually all languages, but all the more so at this length of time, cultural difference. At least Sanskrit and English, Pali and English belong to the Indo-European language group, but that isn't much help if you suddenly open a Sanskrit book. The fact that it's an ancient Indo-European language won't help you very much. But to come back to the point of translation, when a translator, a word might have a range of meaning. I'm talking here just about the key words, the key doctrinal words, the key words that explain things. I mean, a bucket is a bucket and a spade is a spade in any language. They don't present a problem. But certain key words do present a problem. When a translator is translating, I mean, if it's just doing a straight unannotated, straight word-for-word translation, the translator, however scholarly and learned he is faced with a difficulty. He has got to select one word in the target language to represent the one word of the original language. And even the most brilliant translators like Norman Bicubodi, Valerie Roebuck, they cannot, it can't be done. And I'm going to give you the first example. By the way, before I go into it, these passages that I've taken, barring the two Sanskrit ones, passage number 3 I put in for my own nostalgic purposes, really, I'll explain. But all of the Pali passages are kind of central key passages and very well known. Some of you may have spotted, if you've had time to read this, that passage number 5, beginning Imasminyeva Bhyama Mate Kalevare, was quoted by the Venerable Sanganayaka last night. I was pleased to note that he'd singled that one out for quoting to you. And passage number 2, sabbapapassa akaranam, you have already heard twice since arriving here. Because the sabbapapassa akaranam passage, Daiko Osho-san told us the story of the Zen teacher who was meditating up on top of a tree. And this rather obstreperous monk down below said, well, what is the Buddha's teaching then? This is the passage that he said. It's that very passage to which the retort was, every 3-year-old knows that. Which, yes, but have you ever put it into practice? So this is the one that every 3-year-old knows. And hopefully soon a lot of people considerably, well, a little bit older than 3 will know it too. I hope to increase that number by a few before I'm out. I want to look first, I won't be going through these in order. I'll be looking firstly at number 6, which is going to give a very, very good example of how even a highly competent translator doing the best possible translation will not get the whole meaning if it's a word-by-word translation. And this passage number 6, it's the, oh yeah, this is from the Valerie Roebuck translation of the Dhammapada, year 2010 Penguin, if I remember rightly. So I won't bother with the second line of it in detail, but the first line I will look at in detail. And it's going to show you 2 things. Firstly, how no translation, even by somebody as distinguished as Valerie Roebuck, I have to say that, but although it's true, a member of my own Sangha, of whom there are a couple here, but yeah, Valerie Roebuck is a very distinguished scholar indeed. This is her translation. But also I want to give you a sense of just the physicality of Pali. And by physicality, I mean that the great majority of words are based on a simple root with prefixes and suffixes, word built up from that root, but they all can be, or most of them, can be taken back to a solid, ordinary, physical meaning, as I will show you in a moment. Now, if you look at this passage, actually, before we look at that, so I'm jumping all over the place, but hopefully in a good cause. If you look at passage number 4 at the bottom of page 1, Vaya Dhamma Sankhara Appamadena Sampadeta. Those are the last, incidentally, the last recorded words of the Buddha immediately before his death. Now, Vaya Dhamma Sankhara. I remember when I first heard those words in translation, they were actually spoken by our esteemed founder. I remember now, it was Christmas Humphreys himself giving a talk at the Buddhist Society at Cambridge, said in his wonderful sonorous voice and using a sonorous language, you know, impermanent are all conditioned things. And I remember, oh, that sounds beautiful, almost Shakespearean. Impermanent are all conditioned things. Mm-hmm. But it just does not sound like that in Pali. Pali sounds much more like, I explained, look, if something's been put together, it's bound to fall apart again. You know, impermanent are all conditioned things. But they're both saying substantially the same thing. But look, Vaya Dhamma. Okay, I'm going to give you a root. By the way, roots and verbal prefixes. I get a bit manic about them, but honestly, they are worth studying. Let me give you the simplest root of the language. By the way, when we use the square root sign, that's a linguistic convention, meaning this is a root. Okay, that's not too complex. The root I means to go. Did everybody know that? Is there anybody who didn't know that? Okay. Is there anybody here who's ever used the word exit? Okay, yes, you all have. Now, look at the word exit. From, incidentally, e, also in Latin, ire, to go, and the root is e. And he, she, or it goes is it. It's just the root I plus the third person singular ending t. So it is just the Latin he, she, or it goes. Exit, out goes, goes out. Okay, there we are. So we've now got a common root from a word that we use in modern English, and it's the same as the Sanskrit and Pali root e. From that, you can make a verbal noun, aya, meaning going. If in front of that root, you can put lots of prefixes varying the meaning. And we do it, for example, and we do it in English, both with Anglo-Saxon roots, but it's much more obvious with our Latin roots, from the Latin root cur, meaning to run, currere, in Italian, correre, courir in French. And if you use the prefixes to give distinct meanings, very common prefixes to a very ordinary verb, you get, for example, excursion. From curre, you get cursum, cursus, a course, meaning a running. An excursion means running out. An incursion means running in. To recur, recurring, means running again. And a root like vertere, to turn. You can get convert, to turn somebody towards you, or to turn something into something else. To revert, to turn back. To invert, to turn upside down. And you have introverts, extroverts. You can divert. So all of these are simple verbal prefixes which have their own range of fairly circumscribed meanings with common roots. You make a vast vocabulary out of a relatively small number of words. Now, we see it happening in Latin and the Romance languages. In the Slavonic languages, it regularly, routinely happens. We have Iris, a speaker of us. Do we have any other Slavonic speakers here? Anyway, you seem to be alone, Iris. Not to worry. We see it in the Anglo-Saxon roots, but you're seeing it the whole time in Sanskrit and Pali. So the quite complicated notions are represented, and a vast array of complex notions are represented by the simple collocation, collocare, putting together, sandhi in Sanskrit, of quite simple elements. Before I continue with this, I'll come back to it. There was one particular very interesting point that had been raised by Duncan, who is going to have to leave to man the bookshop in a few minutes. So Duncan, it was about the alpha privative, the negating a. Can you just repeat the point you were mentioning a while ago?
I didn't know the alpha privative bit, but it was people were talking about the three flowers, loba, dosa, and moha. And then they also used aloba, adosa, amoha. And I was asking James the difference between if you like, the positive thing and the negative thing. Could you elaborate?
Yeah, I can indeed. In fact, I was thinking further about what you said.
Question, by the way.
No, okay. No, he did genuinely ask me, and I said, hey, that's a good point. So it's not quite a planted question. Okay. The alpha privative. We will use the alpha privative. It's where you put an a in front of a word to negate the meaning of it. We're doing it the whole time in English, via Greek, of course. Thank you, Greeks, for the alpha privative, as for so much else, Platon. Well, is he called Plato, our friend here, Platon. So it's the negating. You put an alpha in front of something to negate the meaning of it. From the Greek word, the Greek root, by the way, tom, meaning to cut. You get atomos, uncuttable, which are our English atom. It's generative in the sense that even in the modern languages, you can go on creating new words. You have apolitical, amoral, or amoral, just meaning negating the meaning of the word. It also means not having something. For example, theos, God, if you're an atheist, means you are godless or not believing in a God. When I say it's generative, I mean, new words can constantly be made. I mean, I was delighted to see, just when I was looking at the back of this packet of pens that I was given yesterday, it says the ink is non-toxic. Okay. And I looked at the Italian, it says chisel tip, it says punta spatola atossico. You see, tossico, atossico, atoxic, non-toxic, you see. So there we are. The alpha privative is very much alive and well. Am I getting my Italian right, Italian speakers? Thank you very much. Now, so that's the meaning of the alpha privative, basically. But it also has not only a negating, but actually stating the opposite. And this is a point that actually dawned on me suddenly last night. Let me give you an example. I'll come back to this sheet in a minute. Let's look at the root vid. Try to start everything with a, oops. Oh, sorry, Chico. This is your... Is it still working? So you've got vid, meaning, yeah, to see and to know. Knowing and seeing are the same. If they were merged effectively in the same word. So from which we have videre in Latin and modern Italian, of course, and vision and a video from that vid, and also in English wit, not wit being funny, but wit in the sense of lost your wits, keep your wits. It's your knowledge. One of the ways of making a verbal noun is to add ya to the end, so you get vidya. So root vid plus suffix ya, meaning knowledge, just makes a noun out of it. By regular phonetic mutation, vidya becomes vidya in Pali. The dya becomes a ja. You find that it happens when we're colloquially speaking English as well. It happens in many languages, the dya to ja. And Latin, hodie becomes oggi in Italian. So it's the same phenomenon you're seeing. So vidya then means knowledge. Now, we all know the word avidya. Sorry, we all know it. Many of us who've been in Buddhism for a while will know the word avidya, which is commonly translated as ignorance, not knowing. Avidya, Sanskrit, avidya with a j, Pali. Then it dawned on me, and this is carrying on from Duncan's point, that it's not just a not knowing. You might have knowledge on a scale of 0 to 10, and you might say avidya is 0. But hang on, it dawned on me, it's actually a kind of anti-knowledge. Things that we think we know. The problem is not knowing something, but having this almost positive, malicious, not quite malicious is the wrong word, but noxious ignorance. The ignorance that makes us think we know. That's the dangerous one. That is what said. Why had it taken me so many decades for this to dawn on me? That it's an actual kind of anti-knowledge, not just not knowing. So this alpha privative, the negating alpha, using the Greek word for a, not only negates it, but actually indicates the the opposite as well. And so with the examples that you mentioned, Duncan, say them again.
Loba, dosa, moha. Three fires.
The three fires. And if you negate them, it doesn't necessarily mean just the absence of lobha. It can mean the opposite quality, the opposite good quality, not just the absence of the bad quality. So that is, okay, one very good example. Well, I think it is. You'll be the judges of whether it's a good example or not. That is a good example of how the translation can actually miss these things. You know, there's nothing the poor translators can do about it apart from giving footnotes that run to 5 or 10 times the length of the text itself. And those of you who are familiar with my Sanskrit and Pali classes will know that's exactly what I do when I'm producing the texts for you. I mean, there's more footnote and explanation than there is translation. As I'm constantly telling the students, translation is just a guide to the sentence structure. You know, really to understand it, you've got to go into the language. So here we are. Vid, which we have as wit, seeing, knowing. Vidya, vidya, avidya. So the structure of the word itself is actually pretty simple. But there's so much meaning that you can get out of it if you delve into the ramifications, particularly of this alpha privative. This now leads me right back. You're free to go if you wish. I think you've got bookshop duty. Okay. Thanks for your non-planted question, Duncan. Very good. Okay, thanks, thank you. So we'll now get back to our passage number 6 on the second page. Okay, this is about words and delving into words rather than grammar. Tiny little bit of grammar for those who don't know it. The final word in that line written as a CA by convention. When we're using Roman script, we use the letter C to represent the sound cha, so it is a cha. And if we write CH, that's the aspirated cha. So cha just means and. Directly cognate with the Latin que at the end of it, senatus populus que Romani, meaning and. You'll see all of these words end in an ena. That's just the instrumental ending. So, for example, uttana, effort, uttanena, by effort. Appamada, okay, here loosely translated as awareness, more on that in a moment. Appamadena, by awareness. Sanyama, restraint. Sanyamena, by restraint. And dhamma, taming or controlling something, dhammena. Now, Valerie Roebuck, and most of the translators have translated pretty much the same, translated this uttanena pamadena, uttanena pamadena sangyamena dhammena cha, by effort, awareness, restraint, and self-control. Okay, effort, awareness, restraint, self-control. What do those words mean? Now, if we start thinking what they mean, us in this room, we are using English in the 21st century, and so what our minds do is to go straight to the resonances and meanings of these words as they're used in modern English right now, in contemporary English. The essence of what I'm always trying to do in my teaching is to bring you inside the words, really to look inside those words and to feel, as far as we can at this distance in time and cultural difference, as far as we can, how they would have felt to the native speakers. Some people have a distinct advantage. There are two in this room who will have a major advantage, of course. There's Usha, native language, a very distinguished teacher in my own Sangha, native Punjabi, and we have Udayan. Your native language is Bengali, is it? Yes. By the way, just before we started, he did just a beautiful recitation to me in Sanskrit. At some stage, I'll ask you to do it again, Udayan, if I may, Udayan. Let's just look at the word uttana, translated as effort. It means actually, literally, standing up. So the root is sta. It's the same root as Latin stare, English stand, stehen in German, in Russian stać. What is it in Croatian? Stajati. Okay, we've got this sta in all of these, throughout the Indo-European. We have an Irish speaker here. Siobhan, is Siobhan here? Do we have the sta in any of the Celtic languages, do you know? Oh, goodness me. Oh, well, I'm sure it may have been in the older forms of the language. It's survived in most of them.
Shas is the stand-up.
Shast. I think it's there. You often find vowels getting inserted in satasha and things like that. That's one of the complexities I'll attempt to avoid during this little series, but it does seem to be. So anyway, sta is to stand. Remind me what is in Greek. Tisime, isn't it? Yes. Okay. So you've lost the S there. The S got lost in Greek, unusually. Actually, not so unusually, because I shall be explaining in a moment in the in number 2, sabba. You wouldn't believe it's the same as olos, but it is. Sarva, holos, they are actually from that same root. Anyway, sorry, I digress.
It's still got the root in modern Greek.
Stekome, of course, yes. Great, thanks. Thank you. I didn't. Please do throw these things in. We all learn as we go on. Stekome, of course, I'd forgotten that. And diasteten erisantes, they parted in hostility. Diasteten, they stood apart. And apostasis as well. Apostasy is simply standing away. Apostasis, standing away. So anyway, sta, the prefix ut, it's actually cognate with our English word out, and it means both out and up, but it means more up in Sanskrit. It is a rule of Sanskrit phonetics, by the way, that you can't have an S between two plosives. So ut-sta becomes utta, the S drops out by a normal phonetic rule. So utta, literally stand up. Make a verbal noun out of it, and you get uttana. In Pali, sometimes the quality of the T will vary from dental to retroflex. You were asking me about that. When you see dots under the dentals, the t, d, n, that just means it's the retroflex t, d, d, l, n, n. So sometimes the Sanskrit t will turn up as a t in Pali. That's where you get uttana in Pali. So there we are. Uttana just means standing up. Effort, yeah, okay, it's okay as a one-word translation. But in English, we have the idiom, get off your backside. No, seriously. And that's what this is saying, actually get up and do it, the uttana. Effort has a slightly different, connotation. Look at the word effort. Latin, fortis, forte. strong. It's the inner strength. The English word force comes from that same. So an effort, like in later Latin was exfortiare, meaning to put forth strength, to put forth effort. And that is, it's a different, slightly different mental feeling, it seems, almost a different psychological experience. There's an inner strength that you're pushing out your strength, making an effort. Whereas this uttana has a slightly different connotation to it. It's getting off your backside idea.
Used to tell when you were stuck in something or having an interview, she'd give you the standing up exercise because she said that was wholehearted giving. To stand up is the root, that effort to stand up is the root of wholeheartedness.
Wonderful, good. That's another plug in there. So I think yes.
It's a basic, and if you have to stand up and down for 20 minutes, you will be very tired.
I have been at the receiving end of Irmgard Schlegel Myokyoni. Yeah. In fact, seriously, this is a little aside. One of the best bits of advice I ever had was on the same line from Irmgard Schlegel. And she was talking about, look, back to the physicality of it. It does tie in. And she and Irmgard Schlegel, the old Zen teacher, Austrian origin actually, but phenomenal teacher. And she was talking about the complete physicality of this practice. And she gave a really useful bit of advice, and that how the mind can follow the body. And she said, if ever, for example, I think she detected that I suffered occasionally from a tiny bit of laziness. And she said, if you're in bed, can I have a bit more time in bed? Do I have to get up yet? She said, all you need to do is let one foot, just one foot, let one foot drop out of the bed onto just one foot. You don't have to get up. No, just let one foot drop out. And wow, the rest followed. No, seriously, it worked. And once the foot had dropped out, it's almost a trigger for everything else in the body. Now, one thing I absolutely do not hold myself out as a Dharma teacher or a meditation teacher. There's one point I found useful following that same point, is that if you're feeling lazy about doing a sit, doing a practice, one very clever trick by which I deceive my own mind, following on from Irmgard's advice, is that you're feeling lazy about doing your sit. Okay, I'll go now and I will sit on my cushion. This is at home. If you're in the center, of course, you do it because you have to, because everyone else is and you can't not. But on your own, I said, right, I'm going to sit down, and as soon as I have sat on the my stool, I'm allowed to finish immediately, even after 1 or 2 seconds. So I tell myself I'm allowed to finish immediately. I don't have to do a proper sit. I sit down, and the mere fact of sitting, it completely transforms your entire mental attitude. And sometimes you find an hour later, wow, I only had to be here for a couple of seconds. So there we are, the uttana. Thanks very much for that. So there we are, uttanena, by getting off your backside, dropping your foot out of bed, actually making a movement towards it. Appamadena. I wait for time. Appamadena. It's often translated as, how's it translated here? Awareness. It's translated as diligence, the one with the misprint at the bottom of the first page, that same word. Yeah, appamadena sampadeta. Again, there's no one-word translation for it. It's more or less, it's in many cases equated with sati, mindfulness. Or might say appamada is the fruit of sati. They're pretty much equated. There is a case for saying, it's difficult to say what's the most important, if you had to make a choice, what's the most important single word that the Buddha ever said? Of course, it's impossible to say. However, I would feel quite happy standing up and arguing that it was appamadena. And the reason for my arguing this, slightly tongue-in-cheek, but not entirely. You can make a genuine case for it. This is the last sentence that he said. Vayadhamma sankhara appamadena sampadeta. Appamadena, strive on with diligence, with appamada. So I'm looking at number 4 now, but we're going to come back to number 6. It's the same word we're talking about here. In Sanskrit and Pali, as in various other languages, and indeed as in modern Hindi, and I think Punjabi and Bengali as well, you put the verb at the end of the sentence. And that's all. The verb comes at the end of the sentence, and does in Sanskrit and Pali. Now, even with his dying breath, the Buddha, of course, observed the normal rules of grammar, so he put the verb at the end, appamadena sampadeta, with diligence strive. If that grammatical rule had not existed, if they followed, for example, the same word order as English, appamadena would have been the very last word he said. And the reason I attach such importance to it, and I think Buddhists generally do, is that this one word, appamadena, is like used in the adverbial form here, diligently, with diligence, with awareness, is his one-word instruction, the encapsulation of all of our endeavors. Sampadeta, strive on, I'll explain that in a moment, appamadena, with appamada. So that was the one word to how to live life, appamadena. Now, as I said, so often translated as diligence and that kind of thing, care, various other translations for it. They aren't coming into my mind at the moment. But anyway.
The 5th precept. In the 5th precept, sometimes they say.
Yes, that's right. Pamadatthana, the pamadatthana, the cause of pamada. So appamada, that's with the alpha privative, the negating appamada. It's from the root mud. And that looks a bit like our modern English word mad. And actually, it is both from the same root. But it's a slightly there's a different tone and meaning to it in Sanskrit and Pali. The root mad is more like kind of exuberant. It starts off meaning kind of joy, like exuberant joy, getting carried away with yourself. Over enthusiasm, the mind rushing forth. The gushing, the wanting mind, the excitement. That's the mad, makes its verbal noun mada. Let us put in front of it the prefix, the Sanskrit form of the prefix, pra, and you get pramada. So this prefix, pra, it's cognate with the Latin and Greek prefixes pro, meaning forth, onwards. We have progress, for example, gressus meaning as progress. The word to prophesy from the root is bhasha, pe, or phi, the pronounced in modern Greek is pe, in classical Greek, means to speak. So a prophet is one who speaks forth. So there a movement forward, progression forward, it often contains the idea of something continuing under its own momentum, a progression. Actually, it does encourage me, Dr. Udayan, that I see you nodding. Very good to be upheld by members of my esteemed audience. Thank you. So pramada, what does pramada really mean? It's often translated as heedlessness, carelessness, the opposite of mindfulness. Pramada, you might even colloquially put it in English, madding forth. So the mind with its excitement, its desires, its hatreds, its aversions, its ego, just on and on and on, that is the pramada. is carrying on under its own mad momentum there. Little language note, whenever you get almost whenever you get a word, a pra in Sanskrit, that just becomes a pa in Pali. So you get pamada. But, a little bit of grammar here, if you put immediately before it a word with a short vowel, including our alpha, privida, the pra comes back in the form of a doubled consonant. So apramada in Sanskrit, appamada in Pali. Chris, you're nodding sagely. I see you've mastered this well from the many lessons that you have diligently attended. So, that now is the feeling of this word. So yeah, you can translate it. I mean, what was Valerie or Roebuck or any of the other of the translators to do? But it had to pick one word. The word awareness is chosen. But as you can see, by choosing the word awareness, I can't say it's wrong, but it's necessarily limited. It only gives you a small part of the entire picture. It's like seeing what a building looks like at night, and you shine a torch at it. You see one little pool of light on one wall. You see a tiny part of the picture. So apramada. So uttanena pamadena. So by getting off your backside and not letting your mind go rushing madly forth. Sanyamena. I'm going to come back to that root yam, which is one of my... There are so many things that I say it's almost one of my favorite roots, but here we are, yam is so full of meaning, the yam. So, sanyama, translated here as restraint. I have mentioned the physicality of the language. Now look at this word sanyama. And also I'll tell you, I was at a meeting, it was a Zoom meeting a while ago with the group I normally meet with, and we were discussing this very verse. And Valerie Roebuck's, this same translation was used, and they said, by effort, awareness, restraint, and self-control. And the question then arose, restraint and self, what is the real difference between restraint and self-control? And the conversation started. And after a while, I did on that occasion manage to keep my big mouth shut. I thought it wasn't my place to intervene. But the conversation just became, I wouldn't quite want to use the word silly, but the conversation became very well-intentioned but misguided, because here we were discussing these English words, contemporary English words. What's the difference between restraint and self-control? You know, I exercised great restraint and self-control because I didn't say, look at the bloody Pali. Sorry, I wouldn't have said it like, look at the Pali, the distinguished Pali text. Because those two words, sanyama and dhamma, they have both their powerful, emphatic meanings. You can feel their meanings. Now, sanyama, the root yam, the primitive meaning of that root, I think Monier Williams in a Sanskrit dictionary gives its first meaning as lift, but the most primitive meaning of yam, by the way, I do please invite contradiction and correction. I'm still learning as we go along. So this root yam, it implies the exertion of force, not a violent hitting force, but like a pushing force of a heavy, or a lifting force. That's the idea of yam. And so it includes the idea of restraint, and sometimes in a slightly pejorative way, there's King Yama, the king of death. Now look at sanyama, this root, the prefix sun, cognate with the Latin co and con, which we have in English, means it can mean with or gathering in, or a sense of completeness. To tenere, to hold, from English we have to contain, to hold within it. So sanyama, sun here gives this meaning of like holding in, gathering in, as in samadhi, that I'll come back to, and the yama, the exercising of a kind of force. Now, again, talking about the physicality of it, it may occasionally have happened to a couple of you over the course of your lifetime that you feel a kind of, talking about physicality, I'm being slightly vulgar, but please excuse me, you might feel a slight internal atmospheric pressure building up, which you might not want to release at that moment because it might be antisocial to do so. That is a sanyama. You're exercising a restraining control over it. See? Now, okay, now, serious now. How can you apply this idea to the moral tone, the psychological tone? It's the sanyama. It's something that is once like a burst of anger, unkind words, any kind of, unskillful, nasty behavior, for example, towards others. So this word sanyama, whose more physical meaning I have just described, it's that same moral approach. You are applying that same sanyama. No, don't let it burst out. Don't let the anger burst out, the unkind words burst out. It is that kind of sanyama to a force that's within you, wants to burst out. No, wrong thing to do, don't do it. So you're actually restraining a force. Dhamma has an entirely different meaning. It's from the root dham, modern Greek domazo, to tame, from the same root as domus, domesticate, dominus in Latin. It's the same root as our English word tame. So domus, domestic, tame, dham, they're all that same root. And the verbal noun which you have here is dhamma. So dhamma has more the meaning of taming. Now what's the difference? Taming, imagine a wild beast. Think back a few thousand years, when this language was thriving, and the world was a dangerous place. You had wild beasts, you had domesticated animals, non-domesticated animals. You had wild and dangerous animals. So take dham now. Imagine a wild and dangerous animal that can be tamed so that its potentially harmful force, its danger, not only can be neutralized, but actually turned to your advantage, like the taming of the horse, the taming of dogs, the taming of oxen, buffaloes. That is the dhamma. So now we see, this now, it can open up the way to an interesting dharma conversation here in a way that this translation, restraint and self-control, can't. Now look back at the force, the subject, what those words feel like. And now you're getting quite an interesting conversation going. What different things are you doing when you are sanyama, performing sanyama, restraint on a burst of an unskillful action? And what can you do now with the taming? Are there forces there? A burst of anger, you could apply two things to them. First of all, the burst of anger, sanyama, to be applied, but equally that power that lies behind it, can it be tamed? Can it be brought within? Can it be tamed, so to speak, to make it like a useful animal, a useful power, rather than a violent, destructive power? Sexual impulse, for example, the monastics know well. Well, those who do it properly know well that it is a force which, running wild, can be destructive and harmful, but tamed and channeled can be like the useful, the powerful, useful ox. So this is just an example how examining the Pali words can open up a useful conversation among us in 21st century Europe, just by looking at the differences in what the Pali says. And that's a far more useful conversation, I would respectfully submit to you. Sorry, the lawyer's coming out. It's a far more useful, that's a far more useful conversation, saying what's the difference between restraint and control? What's the difference between the sanyama of the burst of emotion and the dhamma of a powerful force that's there and can be brought in to serve you? Please.
That's like the bull herding pictures.
Exactly, the bull herding pictures.
In the struggle, it's really violent. You know, you're really tugging, and then it by itself, by doing that, it becomes tame. So it happens by itself.
Thank you very much. I was going to put that in. It entirely slipped my mind. Thanks very much for bringing it up. Yeah, the famous, the Zen, is the 10 bull herding pictures.
The bull, so,
Yeah.
You know, and the initial stages, it's very hard work and quite a struggle. But through that, it gentles itself because it is the same energy. I think that's
It's the same energy. Now that is a perfect example of dhamma, not sanyama. If all you ever do with that bull is sanyama, you make it worse and worse and worse. You know, just constantly blindly restraining a force. But that's now there's a wonderful example of the difference between sanyama and dhamma.
Don't they, the Tibetans say it's an elephant, I believe. The Tibetans have a picture just like it with an elephant and a monkey, I believe.
I think we have that at the Manchester Centre, don't we, Usha? Yeah, that same one, but with the elephant. Yeah, with the elephant gradually starts off with a dark, malevolent colour and finishes up getting lighter and lighter. Yeah, that's right.
The bull actually comes from the Theravada tradition as well. There is
That's right, yeah.
Theravada Sutra. The bull being yoked and cultivated is actually, if you look at the famous book by Walpole Rahula.
Oh, what the Buddha taught.
He doesn't mention it in that book, but there's another book in honor, studies in honor of Walpole, where
Okay, yeah.
essays, and one of the essays he picked up on was the origin of the bull herding picture. So it was actually pre-Buddhistic. It was a Hindu kind of the cow is sacred, so it's come from that. So quite interesting, the parallels.
Thank you for pointing that out, Dr. Udayan. I shall dig that out as soon as I'm back home. We've just got a couple of minutes left before we resume tomorrow. In honor of the valuable contribution, I'm going to go back to our root I, you see, I, to go. And we have the root aya, and I told you viaya. Oh, I got distracted at that point, didn't I? Okay, viaya, coming apart, going apart. Another way of forming the verbal noun from is ayana. You see, ayana, meaning a going. You have the Rama ayana becomes the Ramayana, literally the goings of Rama, meaning the exploits, the life of Rama. If you put the prefix ut or ud, depending what the following letter is, that means up. So you can get so the udayana literally means the going up. Just as a bare ordinary word, it means the going up. In the modern languages of northern India that have descended from Sanskrit and the Prakrits, the final a is not pronounced. That's why, for example, among the Hindi speakers, I think it's the same among the Punjabi and Bengali speakers, they don't talk about a vihara, but a vihar. They don't talk about Buddha, just Buddh, and so on. And they find it terribly funny, apparently, when they hear of English people talking about the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, because they say Mahabharata and Ramayana. Anyway, in the modern languages of northern India, it's pronounced Udayan, literally, the rising up. And it's also used to mean, by specific extension of meaning, the sunrise. And that is the given name of kind Dr. Udayan, who has just been helping us here, so Dr. Sunrise, whose family name is such a wonderful name, Chakravarti. Literally, the chakra means a wheel, cognate with the Greek word kyklos, modern Greek kyklos, meaning a wheel, from which we get cycle. So cycle, kyklos, cyclicity, chakra, and we have the yoga chakras. It literally means a wheel. And Chakravarti, from the root vrit, meaning to turn. We use it in English. Convert, divert. I was talking a moment ago about it. So the vartin and vrit and Latin vert are all that same root. So the Chakravartin is the turner of the wheel. And it's one of the epithets of, of royal majesty and power, he who turns the wheel. And we have the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, a sutta on the Dhammacakkappavattana, the turning forward, pravartana in Sanskrit, pavattana in Pali. So Dhammacakka, the wheel of the law, Dhammacakkappavattana, the turning forth of the wheel of the law, the setting in motion, it's often translated, setting in motion the wheel of the law. Please, Usha.
And at the end of that sutta, he says the Buddha Udayana Udeti. He exclaims, Kondana has realized. So it's like the wheel has started, it has turned upwards. He exclaims at the end.
Udayana, he used the Udayana there.
Very blandly, but he's saying, oh, he has realized it's wonderful.
And Udayana and Udeti.
Rising up.
Right.
The teaching has risen up.
Udeti, okay.
That at the end when he exclaimed.
I'll go back to that. Thank you for that, Usha. So the verb Udayana, Udayan, it would be pronounced in modern India now, just mean is the verbal noun. The verb is Udeti. So we now have it also, your esteemed name, Doctor, at the end of the Dhammacakkappavattana, which I hadn't spotted before. Thank you for that, Usha. Okay, we've just turned 3 o'clock, so with your permission, I shall resume at 2 o'clock tomorrow. And thank you very much for your kindness and patience. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you.